Welcome to the podcast. This show is entirely dedicated to the wisdom and the stories of people embracing their true and extraordinary nature, of overcoming, breaking through limits, tapping into universal wisdom, and hopefully inspiring you to do the same. Hey, welcome to another episode of Being Extraordinary. It's a solo episode today, but before we get started, I just have to comment on how incredibly awkward it is for me to do videos with this. I feel like I'm such a great speaker. Wisdom just kind of flows through me very easily when I set the right intentions, and wisdom that I'm passionate about, not just general wisdom. But recording with the video really messes me up. I don't know why. So, what I wanted to talk about today is something that's been on my mind, and I'm hoping that it just comes out how I want it to, because I had this massive download about it, but I'm recording it much later than when the download came through, so I hope it just flows. So what I wanted to talk about today is how to discern what's true versus untrue when you're consuming information. I'm going to speak about it as it pertains to the spiritual path, but I think that what I say is something that you can utilize in any realm. And what kind of prompted this idea or this insight? There was two things. Number one is sometimes I do have clients that come to me and they'll say that they had went to a session with a different person and they left really nervous, really felt bad about themselves, and they went into these like spirals of anxiety about like what's the right path, what's the wrong path. So these are active healing practitioners that are leaving their clients in a state of somewhat nervous mayhem. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't ever done that. I'm sure that there are points on my journey where I've left people like that, but I like to believe that right now that's not how you're going to leave a session with me, because that's the farthest thing from my intention. But I'm going to acknowledge right away I'm not perfect. But I don't like hearing that when clients come to me and that's been their most previous experience. The second thing that kind of made me think about it is when I'm doom scrolling on, let's say, Instagram, and I see some real bullshit. Or sometimes I'll have students of mine send me videos and they're like, is this true? And it's difficult to discern. We are in the age of information, and there's, anyone can be an expert on anything now. And there's all this media coming at us all the time. So like I said, I am going to talk about the spiritual journey and spiritual truth, but hopefully the tips I give you will just transcend into any topic. When we are consuming stuff specifically about the spiritual journey, I see some things. There's people talking about the false light. If you believe this, it's the false light. The Akashic records are the false light. This is the false light. And it doesn't even make sense, first of all, because there's no such thing as false light. Okay. We need to define the parameters of reality for a moment. And this again applies to everything. So everything exists on a polarized spectrum, which means if we use light and dark, there's the light side of the spectrum and there's the dark side of the spectrum. Okay. So you cannot be a false light. You're either on the dark aspect of the spectrum or you're on the light aspect of the spectrum. So when we're talking about spirituality, what is light versus dark? Light is enlightenment, which is wisdom, which is knowledge, which is truth, which is remembering. And if we're truly tapping into our soul's energy, our light, our remembering, our truth, there's nothing to ever be afraid of. I'm aware of so many of my past lives. I died in all of them, but yet here I am. I've wept, I've walked through my death portals. I've been murdered. I've murdered people, one person for sure that I'm aware of anyway. And I'm still here. I even know exactly who I murdered in a past life, and we're bros and we're friends. If you're really truly tapping into the light aspect of spirituality, you will eventually get to a point where there's nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. It's the light, it's empowerment, it's truth, it's liberation. It's this remembering of our soul, our eternal existence. What is darkness? Darkness is the suppression of truth. It is the suppression of knowledge. It is fear. It is control. It is enslavement versus the light, which is empowerment and truth. So first of all, nothing can be the false light. False light is it's not even a term that is like logical or accurate. The dark agenda on this planet is going to always enslave you. It's going to always induce fear. And it's always going to be suppressing truth. So when you see someone sitting on a screen telling you that this is the false light, it's just the darkness, okay? Darkness is manipulative. Darkness is suppression. Darkness is not true. So that's just the dark agenda. And the dark agenda exists in all things. It exists in government, it exists in schools, it exists in spirituality, it exists in the political structures. It exists in institutions like marriage or religion. Dark and light simultaneously exist on this planet. And the dark infiltrates every agenda, but the light also infiltrates every agenda. So there's always going to be, even in the place that you work right now, there are going to be people who suppress knowledge and truth and benefit from you living in fear. And there are going to be people that want to empower and uplift and enlighten, bring knowledge and have us live in a more peaceful state. You can probably think of people at your work that operate in this sense and operate in that sense, right? So there's no such thing as false. There's nothing other than the polarity. And the dark agenda does consistently try to dupe you. It consistently tries to make you forget your truth. And people will do this in every world. It's either you're in the light or you're in the dark. And with the light and dark spectrum as well, it's important to know that it's not necessarily speaking about your soul, okay? There are perfectly light and positively oriented souls who do dark and suppressing things, right? They're in pain, or they're living in ego, or they've forgotten themselves and they've somehow moved into a position of power and authority. And because they're in a state of this lack of consciousness themselves, this lack of enlightenment themselves, sometimes they'll accidentally contribute to the dark agenda. Okay, I hope that you're picking up. I'm not talking about like good and evil necessarily. I'm just talking about the definition spiritually of light versus dark in this particular setting. But there are also people who actively know they are conscious, they are aware of spiritual truth, that just operate in the dark manner, that they know what's going on, they have wisdom, they have truth, they understand the fabric of reality, and they are manipulating us on purpose. Just for example, it doesn't actually matter what the intention of someone who's standing in the light or someone who's standing in the dark is. It doesn't really matter about the personal agenda. It just matters what is the benefit of pushing a dark agenda or pushing the darkness or pushing suppression and fear and anxiety and enslavement. What's the point of that? Well, I'll just pin it there for a minute and tell you a story that will help illustrate the point. So when I was pre-spiritual truth, when there was a point in my life where I didn't necessarily believe anything was going on, I had a friend who was a Jehovah's Witness, and they believe only 144,000 people are going to make it to the afterlife. And she was like, I know it's not going to be me. So I've decided that I'm just going to live my best life and I'm just going to rot in the earth. And that's my story. And when she said it to me, I believed it. So anyway, I was like, yeah, I guess that's not so bad. It's fine. I'm good with that. So I'm not dying for there to be meaning. I just accidentally found it. I was perfectly fine with rotting in the earth, just so everyone's aware. So when I was spiritual meaning to everything, there was something I constantly noticed, which was corruption, which was lies, which was deceit, which was manipulation. I noticed it first when I was working at my very first job, which was at a gas station, if you don't count babysitting. And I grew up in this very rural, very sheltered farm upbringing. There were 8 kids in my classroom for my whole life. So I had 8 other peers in my grade for the majority of my career, and we didn't really go anywhere or do much. Like, we were farm kids through and through, so very sheltered. And this is pre-internet, pre-TV, like satellite TV. Like, we had 2 channels, and I didn't get the internet till I was like 17. So I was just about out of high school. So super sheltered. Didn't really play organized sports, so didn't even see people from the city, like, very, very sheltered. So I get this first job, and I immediately notice that everything everyone does makes no sense. There's people in dress suits driving BMWs, and they're the most miserable people that I've ever met. So rude, so arrogant, so degrading. And I remember I didn't know what that was about. And you have to really imagine that everyone in my world was very authentic. Like, there was no ego, there was no BMWs, there was no business people out in the farm life, okay? We were just pumpkins, including my peers, pumpkins. This wasn't something that we thought about. So then just imagine an alien walking into that social setting, really, and just being like, I don't get this. You obviously have a good job. You're very beautiful. You have a nice car. Like, why are you so rude? Even to this day, I honestly am not 100% sure why people do that. But I started realizing really quick that the things that you kind of thought as a child were what the point of life was really aren't the point of life. To have money, success, to be beautiful, to have a good career clearly is not translating to happiness. These people are so miserable. So it made me ask, like, what's really going on here? And then you start following that thread, and it just leads you to all types of conspiracies, right? It leads you to, why is the social expectation to get a lot of money and work really hard, even though it clearly doesn't translate to happiness? Who's benefiting off this storyline? Or you start to realize that the same 10 families or 5 families own everything. And you're kind of like, well, these families have infinite amount of power and money. They're worth trillions of dollars and they own every industry. So they have all the power and all the money, which is what people always talk about, is where corruption comes from. You want more money, you want more power. And I think to a certain level of accumulating those things, that's true. But when you have it all in your hands, why are you still trying to control and manipulate people? You have nothing left to gain on this planet. You already hold it all. And that's the part I kept bumping into. And I would tell people about these like conspiracies that I was engaged with, and people just don't even want to believe that a conspiracy is happening because, again, what is there to gain if you already have all the power and money, right? And we can't understand why somebody would be so corruptible or so dark, right? If you already have power and money, right? And so this is what I learned, and this is what the intention is behind the dark agenda, is that it is power, it is money, but what they're actually after is prana. It's after life force. So it's after your life force. And so Monsters Inc., the movie, is actually a great representation of this, where it's like a drug to get people's energy, right? It'd be like being addicted to a high, being addicted to a rush, right? And how do we give life force, and how do people get a high or a rush? There's really 2 ways. And don't get weird or creeped out about it because you already are aware of this. It's a sense of feeling alive. It's the sense of like energy that you receive off of other people, essentially. And so there's 2 ways in which you can get this prana out of people. It's through laughter and happiness and kindness and bringing joy to the world, or it's through scaring people. And which one do you think is fueled more, right? It takes a little bit more energy and effort to create a laugh out of someone or to create happiness out of someone. And it kind of sometimes is like, you got to build it, it takes a little bit more effort and energy. But when you're terrified or anxious that you're not going to pay a bill, or that your food is poison, or your kid's education they're not getting the education that you thought, like, think about how fast that will get a reaction out of you, right? Like it's pretty quick. It's pretty big. So it's through that evoking fear and anxiety and control that they're constantly kind of siphoning this prana and life force out of the collective. And to just add a layer to it, the consciously dark people, the consciously negative people on the planet, essentially do not have their connection to divinity the way that most of us do. So the best way to understand this is there's kind of 2 people. There's wolves and the lambs. And lambs are probably everyone listening here, where you can bask in the sun, you can graze on grass in the field, and all you need is just sun and water and grass to survive. You don't need to feel yourself off anyone else. The wolves, however, they can't just bask in the sun, eat grass, and survive because they don't have their connection to divinity has been so severed that they can no longer just exist. They have to eat the lambs, right? So you and I are the lambs, and how are they going to survive if they don't have the connection to source the same way that you and I do? They have to eat the lambs. And the easiest, best way, because they don't have that connection to source, is to be like sociopaths, right? They got to eat the lambs. And how do they eat us? Through fear, through control, through enslavement, all these types of things. So actually what's happening, why the dark agenda just won't stop, is because it's literally their life force and their fuel. It's how they survive. It's how they kind of like get high. And it's an addiction to prana. It's an addiction to your life force. And it's much more gruesome than just power and money. Okay. Like, really, it's kind of gross, right? So that's why the dark agenda does this. There's also just some other layers to it, but it gets just infinitely more creepy. So we don't need to go into that. That's really all we need to know. And the other thing to know as well is that planet Earth is a place of duality. So this darkness has to exist. And here is the teaching about that, so that you don't look at wolves, you don't walk around terrified, because you came here full well knowing that we learn through duality on planet Earth, right? So how would we know what light is if there was no such thing as darkness, right? How do we know to live in the light? How do we know to live in truth? How do we come home to our own truth if everything's just always truth, right? There has to be a bit of an obstacle course in order to recognize truth, in order to remember. So, just an even easier example, we wouldn't know what tall people are if everybody was the same height. We need that varying of tall to short people to say, oh, this is a definition. You need the opposites to define the other one, right? Or, how do we know what it's like to be warm if we've never been cold, right? We need opposites to define the other one. And so we knew that coming here. And so the dark prana harvesters, they are just a part of the game. It's a part of the fun of being on Earth. It adds complexity, it adds a challenge to it, right? If we're trying to come home to our light and our truth, well, we have to kind of be thrown into the dark. A dream shaman told me this, and I've never forgotten it because it was just it made so much sense to me. So, in the Bible, there is the story of the tree of knowledge and the serpent and Eve. Okay. And so her understanding of that story through her indigenous shamanic perspective was that Eve and Adam were in the Garden of Eden and everything was blissful and joyful and beautiful. And she'd eaten the grapes, like amazing. But she got bored and she said, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to have some excitement in my life. I want a bit more of a challenge. I'm getting bored. I'm not really learning anything by eating grapes and basking in the sun. Like, what else is there? And then the serpent, who in ancient text represents wisdom. So it's perfectly fine that he would be on the tree of knowledge. So snakes aren't such a bad thing. Anyways, so in ancient teaching, snakes represent wisdom. And, the snake says, okay, well, if you do want to grow in your wisdom and your soul experiences, you are going to have to bring down some complicated situations, because when incarnated in a physical vessel, you're going to learn through difficult. And so she had this option to decide. You can keep living in the Garden of Eden, but you won't be able to learn very much because there's not a lot of experience happening here. It's fairly balanced, right? And they said, okay, well, Eve, if you want to learn and grow, you're going to have to eat from the tree of knowledge, and it is going to bring sin, which is darkness or duality, to this place that was once all light and truth and like bliss, And she made this decision. She's like, I do want to grow. I want to grow. I want to evolve. And she ate from the tree, and the world as we knew it changed, because duality came in because we learn the most from opposites, right? We need opposition to define the other. So this dark agenda versus the light agenda, it's helping us make sense of reality and learn and grow. And Earth is a challenging place. It is a master school now. It probably wasn't always back before duality was introduced, but we could have lived 100 lifetimes in the Garden of Eden and learned very little. Now you can live one lifetime and you will learn a lot. And that was the trade-off. But it does exist, and it is here to dupe you and feast upon your prana. And if you're a lamb, it's probably wise not to venture out into the wolf pack, because you will be eaten. And just because we know that when we're in the highest state of enlightenment or the highest state of truth and knowledge, there's nothing to fear, right? But most of us aren't there. I get scared every day. It's still something that we're managing, is the suppression of our truth versus our truth, our enlightenment versus our stuckness, right? It's the process. And just as a reminder, I said it in the last episode, but one of the actual processes of Earth life is to come here, forget everything, and try to get back to the light, try to get back to the knowledge, while basically wiping your slate clean every time you enter the birthing canal, right? So it's actually the name of the game, is to be born in darkness, come home to the light. no matter how many lifetimes it takes you, that's what you're doing. And you don't have to believe it. It doesn't actually matter all the time what we believe. The truth ends up being the truth in the end. And I can't always say I know what the truth is, but I get closer to it every day, I think. Anyways, so how do we actually discern what is going on in the world right now? Because we are bombarded every single day with so much data, so much information, and there are so many people that approach, especially spirituality, with this, I don't know, sense of ego, sense of fear, trying to project fear, trying to tell people they're walking the wrong path, they're listening to the false light, all these just ridiculous things. And so you have to remember there's only light and there's only dark, and you're somewhere on the spectrum of that. And I think everyone's ultimate goal is to start in the absolute abyss of darkness and come all the way back into the absolute purest of light. That's just our process, and we're all at varying levels. And it's not a point of comparison. It just is what it is. We're all on the spectrum, essentially, right? First thing to know is that the light agenda is always going to empower you. There's a couple other layers, but you should feel empowered by the end of it because there is nothing to fear. There is no such thing as right or wrong. There's no point of comparison, and we've all been somewhere else on the spectrum. We've all been in the dark at once. We've all been in enlightenment. We've all kind of known everything. So we can't give each other points of comparison, because if you even think about the tarot journey, right? We start with the Fool and we end at the World, and the World is this great, amazing victory. But you can't get too excited about it because as soon as you master that lesson, you go right back to the Fool again. So it's a circle that never ends, which means there's no point of comparison, right? So it's always going to empower you. It's not going to compare you. It's not going to judge you. It's not going to tell you that you're doing something wrong. It's just going to tell you it is what it is. This is what's happening. This is where you're at. And if that doesn't feel good to you, here's how you can feel more good or more happiness or more whatever. But it's not always roses and daisies. A true emissary of light is going to empower you, but they're not even going to scathe over the difficult parts of your journey. They're likely going to just approach it with a lot of non-judgment. So I'm trying to think of an example. When you think about those examples of those old gurus, the sages that sit on the sides of the mountains in India or, Nepal, and if they're really somebody who's stepping into enlightenment, there's this air of honesty, very honest. They're not sugarcoating things, but there's almost a bit of humor to everything that they do. I remember watching a video, and it was Sadhguru. He's just kind of sitting cross-legged, and this person in the crowd is like, I had a really difficult childhood, she says. And she says, I don't want to forgive my parents. I don't want to forgive them. I can't forgive them. And he non-judgmentally kind of giggles to himself. He's like, okay, well then don't. You don't have to do anything. And he says, you can hold that anger in your heart your whole life. You can blame it for the rest of your life. And it's your choice. And the way that he said it, he was just kind of joking. And he's like, yeah, like if you want to carry hate in your heart and resentment and use it as the crutch of your story, please, it's totally fine. That is your choice. And so in this interesting way, the light will always empower you, but it will never lie to you. It will never subvert the truth. It will always speak the truth, but in a way that makes you feel like you have all the time in the world to figure it out. It doesn't really matter. It's a choice of how much happiness or joy or purpose or power you want to feel in your journey. That is the light. It's empowering, it's non-judgmental, but it's also honest. And so these are some key things. Do I feel empowered after listening to this? Do I feel judged after listening to this? And do I feel like it skips over some parts of the hard truth? Because the light will not skip over truth. Light is truth. I was reading, I think it's Dolores Cannon. No, sorry. It was Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, I believe. And one of the things about superior beings, more evolved, more conscious beings from different worlds and the angel realms and things like this. One of the things it said is that the most difficult thing for them to understand about humans is how much we lie. And they say it creates such a rift in the energy field, which is true. Ever since I read that, I was like, you're right. When you tell a white lie, it feels so sticky and riffy. But then when someone's lying to you, the energy changes around you as well. And they say it's so strange because vibration and frequency never lies. And so it's funny that you guys are so out of touch, that we as humans are so out of touch with the light sometimes that we actively lie to each other. The light is not going to, it's very honest, but in this non-judgmental way, in this way that it knows you have nothing but lifetimes to figure this out. So it actually doesn't matter if it takes you 20 lifetimes, 50 lifetimes, 100 lifetimes to remember and become enlightened, you'll get there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So these are some quintessential pieces. The darkness will do is essentially the entire opposite. They'll make you feel disempowered and fearful. If you feel afraid or fearful, it's definitely not the light. The intention might be good, but this person doesn't have the amount of consciousness to be conveying this kind of information, because it like makes sense, right? Like I almost want to like laugh. Why? How is it the light if it makes you feel afraid? Fear and shame and guilt are on the like deepest recess of the polar spectrum of dark and light. Whereas on the light aspect, it's empowerment, it's acceptance, it's love, right? So when you're looking, let's say, at a spiritual guru, and they're like, if you believe this, you're being duped by the false light. Or if you do this, you're going to be locked into reincarnation for the rest of your life. This is an oppressive system. If they're saying weird shit like that that makes you scared, immediately it is incorrect. There's never going to be anything that somebody who's operating in the light would say to you that would scare you. That just doesn't make any sense. And the other thing, okay, hold on. If too many thoughts. So it shouldn't scare you. It shouldn't make you feel shame. It shouldn't make you feel guilt. If you are feeling those things, it is not this empowering, light-oriented agenda. It's just not. You can't be dark and light at the same time, right? Like it's just impossible. You go into a room and you turn on the light, the darkness has to disappear. You can't be hot and cold at the same time. You can't be short and tall at the same time, right? There's just no such thing. So make no mistake that it's not that complicated. It's just, it's this or it's that. It can't really be both. And you're into your body, and the way that you feel is your compass. Okay. If your body kind of just feels weird or heavy, or you have this gut reaction that it's not empowering, then you listen to that. And your emotions, how do I feel about this? Your emotions are going to be your compass. So the other thing about the empowerment of the light. Okay, so this is something I also learned from Dolores Cannon. But when she was hypnotizing people, she was talking to spirit guides and entities through the person who was hypnotized. And I'm sure it's recorded somewhere in her book that their spirit guides would never tell her about something that would scare her. And I know this kind of goes against a little bit of that truth that I talked about with the light, but just bear with me, okay? So they knew and could assess the consciousness of the person that they were working with. So even though there are sometimes some very complicated, probably somewhat scary things happening on this planet, especially when you think about what the conscious dark agenda is doing, it does evoke fear, even though that is truth. But they are aware that she couldn't process that kind of information. So they would give her the truth intentionally without evoking the fear. So I don't know how you receive the information about the wolves and the lambs, but it is in this kind of peaceful way telling you that, yeah, not everyone on the planet has your best intentions at hand. And not everybody on the planet is somebody who can just operate from the goodness of their soul like you. It's telling you, yeah, there are wolves out there, but it's not meant to evoke a sense of fear. We could talk about it in a different way, be a lot more fearful. But the truth can always be handed to a person without it evoking fear, and the light will do that. And that is just something I've observed. And as I've gotten better at my own work and delivering very difficult pieces of information about someone's past life or someone's karma, there's so many ways now that I deliver it so much better than I did years ago, because I don't have as much of a sense of judgment about it anymore. So for example, I worked with someone not that long ago who has a lot of they're kind of controlling essentially, like, and that was a really big theme of their session was you're kind of controlling, you got to let people be themselves. And that's not always like the nicest thing to say. And I remember her spirit guides telling me, you know, that we develop these types of skills and ability, these types of skills because we needed to survive in the past. To be in control of the situation is how we survived. That was the guides delivering the truth that needed to go to that person, but in a way that did not evoke a sense of self criticism, a sense of self deprecation or failure, or you're doing something wrong when they were speaking. And so that's just something to keep in mind. The truth will still come out, but it should never make you feel disempowered. It should never make you feel judged or like you've done something right or wrong, because we're all children of divinity and we don't judge children for making mistakes. So you shouldn't be judging yourself. So back to how to discern. So we've decided discerning with something that's truly and authentically the light or spiritual truth. It will empower you. It will not judge you. It'll evoke love and compassion. Okay? The same truth can be spoken and one can disempower and one can empower, right? That whole thing about being controlling, we explained it in a way that this is what you did to survive and why. And we talked about her past lives. We talked about how she decided to keep her children and herself safe by meticulously controlling herself and the environment in which she was in so that she did not trigger the volatile person that was creating the abuse in her life. How is that a negative thing, right? But it's no longer serving her. We could have said that story in a way that was so much more critical. You try to control everyone. You project on other people. You're not focused on yourself. You think there's a right way and a wrong way. And because with the light as well, we talked about it's knowledge, it's truth. So we're not just taking this little perspective of the truth. The light expanded it and said, here's why, here's more information. So you know why you do those things and realize it doesn't serve you. It's holding you back. You deserve to have more freedom and ease and trust in your life, right? If we would have just focused on that one trait, right? It's this little pinhole of data. It's not the full perspective, right? Okay. So the other super important thing about light versus dark, and this is really big right now, and I'm hoping that I can convey it in a way that is not offensive to anybody. But the other big part of empowerment, okay, that I think people don't talk about is it should be individuated empowerment, okay? That you as an individual are empowered. The fabric of your soul and your being, it's very individuated, okay? And so this would be, for example, with the girl who was going through the story of survival through control. Well, that was us looking at the fabric of her experiences as a soul. It wasn't just her in this life. It wasn't just her as who she is now. It was over time. And we talked about her individual experience, her individual way of seeing things, her individual way of processing those pains. Okay. And here's a way that sometimes the darkness sort of dupes us. It starts to lump people into categories, these external identifiers, and tries to empower people, tries to sort of make you get lost in a section of people. Okay. And this is something that's really, really happening right now. So, where you're only empowered based upon these like these identifiable features, like you're a woman, or you are a person of color, or you're a newcomer to your country, or because you speak a different language, they start to lump people into categories, and they take this common theme within the category of people and say you are empowered because of this external attribute. And the other thing that's kind of woven into a lot of those things is they try to sell it to you as empowerment, but they're empowering you based upon where you feel the most victimized, okay? And this is huge because you can't actually be empowered while also being a victim, right? So in the story of the woman who was controlling herself or in control, in that story, she was a part of abusive relationship and she felt the need to protect her children, and she did so by meticulously controlling the environment. And we want to acknowledge that she, in fact, was victimized to a degree in that story, right? She was a woman, she wasn't strong. In that timeline, she may have not, women may not have been permitted to work. There were these kind of circumstances that created that. But the thing about the universe, and I'm sure you guys have heard me say this 10,000, nothing can actually happen to us without our consent because we are having this soulful journey. And just because media, news, politics, schools, education systems are no longer integrating any type of spiritual truth into anything that we do, it doesn't mean that that's not the fabric of reality, which is the action and consequence effect. So over the course of our incarnation cycle, everything is based on the action and consequence. So the choices that we make create the consequences that we experience. And the consequences are our entire life. It's our relationships, it's our bank account, it's our friends, it's our family. And we live out the effects which we've set into motion through our choices. This is karma. And I talk about all the time. If you want more on karma, I will put a link in the description box below, where you can listen to me talk about action and consequence, cause and effect, free will, and how we are responsible for all of our effects, essentially. And so sometimes, though, the effects that we've put into motion happened many years ago and many moons ago. And also, so then, for example, with this woman who, with the controlling thing, how there are situations that she could have never necessarily foresaw, right? Absolutely. She was victimized by her circumstances. But at some point, there would have been a choice that she made that opened the door for that instance to happen. So, for example, she may have been very, very abusive to herself. I'm never perfect enough. I'm never strong enough. I'm never smart enough. And so she has these limiting beliefs within herself, which is the darkness, right? We're trying to remember our light. And so then she creates this subconscious invitation for other people to abuse her, for other people to think that she's not smart, for other people, because that's just how reality is on this planet. It's ironic, I know. And then the other thing is that you are not your circumstances, you are the light within yourself. And so you chose to be born to these parents at this place at this time to work out whatever type of karma you had to work out or to have an interesting experience. You get to choose. You are not your external circumstances. You are not lumped in. You are not a piece of this group. And you are not your story of disempowerment or victimization. And so we live in a world right now where there is a lot of consciousness and a lot of knowledge and enlightenment or awareness is coming. So if you're a part of the conscious dark agenda and you know this, you have to manipulate people as they start to spiritually awaken. And so they set these little secret pinholes so that we fall into them. And I think that it makes me the most angry because I definitely fell for it. I definitely fell for it for a certain point in my life. And, where we look at these factors like, I'm a woman and that means I'll never make as much money as my male counterparts, or that means that people are only ever going to judge me based upon like my appearance or what have you. And so we look at whatever the weakest point of this group that we're lumped into, and then they'll try to empower you based on your weaknesses. And first of all, you are not a group. You are not your story. You are not your external attributes, and you are not only worth whatever your struggle is. And that's what they'll do, right? They'll say, because you're a woman, you'll never make this much money and you should be empowered. You should empower yourself in that. And there's like statistics that, if children will never make more than 50% more than their parents made. So if your parents made $50,000 a year, the statistic essentially is that your child can only make $100,000 a year. That's as far as that can go. So they'll give you things that will box you in. And I think that a lot of people who are going through these systemic kind of oppression cycles, their gift was to show us that systemic oppression exists. But it's been kind of contorted and manipulated into this point where we all get really, who's the greater victim? Who is been hurt more? Who is more disadvantaged? Who is more this? Who is more that? And then it actually perpetuates us never getting out of that story and us really identifying with these collective themes. And although they are going to impact us, if it makes you feel like you can never earn more than $100,000 a year, or if it makes you feel like you can never be equal to your male counterparts, if it makes you feel like you're never going to be loved except for something external, if it makes you feel like you're different or you're broken or you're disadvantaged, that is the darkness. And it's not about not acknowledging systemic oppression, because I look at this stuff a lot and I always say this was a gift for somebody to be able to speak up on this and be the light where people were previously stuck in this kind of storyline. But it's getting just slightly out of hand, and it actually is disempowering, right? To hang on to the places where we feel the most disempowered and wear it as a badge of honor, that's not really empowerment, is it? Like, is it? When you're advocating and you're bringing a voice to an experience, it doesn't matter what your experience is. If you bring a voice to it and shine a fucking light for people still in that darkness, that is the light. That is the light. Tell your story. Talk about how the challenges existed, but talk about how you rised out of it. Be the change, be the light. Telling your story is your medicine. I will never dismiss that. Whatever your story is, I almost guarantee you lived it to be a light for people who are still in that darkness. I guarantee it. That is what my podcast is dedicated to when I'm doing the interviews. Don't suppress your story. Talk about the challenging things, talk about the difficult, talk about the culture, talk about the suppression. It is your medicine. I'll say that until I die. And I'm passionate about it, but it's your individual choices. It's your individuality that brought you to exactly where you are today. It is that light inside of you that decided to walk through that darkness in this lifetime, probably to be the medicine on the other side, to learn something about yourself, to break down a limiting belief that you came into this world with. This is not about lumping us into societal groups and standards and constantly competing over who has it the worst. That's fucking disempowering. And I feel like there's no way you can't see it that way. And people who are still in that cycle will tell you it's true, but people who have gotten out of it will tell you it's not true. It's your spirit, it's your heart, it's your choices. It's the fact that maybe you did get knocked down every single day of your life, but you fucking got back up. And so somebody who's involved truly in the light agenda is not going to look at you based on your socioeconomic status, your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your orientation. All of that, to someone who's in the light, is something that you chose to experience for whatever reason. Either you had karma to work out, or else you were here to be a light for other people who were going to struggle with that. So they are not going to lump you into anything. They're going to see you as the spark of divine that you are, which is colorless, formless, shapeless. It is just pure, unique, unrepeatable light. This color that doesn't exist, that's just yours. And they will see you for that. There is also from Dolores Cannon's books, and this is just me repeating what she says. This isn't me judging. I don't know if it's true or not. But she was working with someone who is struggling with some severe health complications in their life. And I think they were like born with some sort of disability. And they were asking in the hypnosis, like, why did I have to deal with this disability my whole life? It's really just like bane of my existence. And the spirit guides told her that when souls are lining up to get windows to incarnate on this planet, there's a longer lineup for bodies that have a disability right now than healthy bodies. And obviously Dolores Cannon was like, what? How could that be? And the answer was that when we experience some type of difficulty on planet Earth, you can learn 10 lifetimes of lessons and pay back 10 lifetimes of karma in one incarnation. So people that don't want to incarnate here for that long, or people that have a lot of karma to pay back and they don't want to do it for 10 lifetimes, they're fast tracking by taking on something that has a little extra spice, a little extra challenge. And they also are lots of times the medicine for the people around them, for their family members entrenched in karma, for their lovers, for their children. They bring so much medicine to the people around them that sometimes you also just have a really profound impact very quickly, right? the other aspect, and this is something I've personally seen time and time and time again, this is a type of human where there's this project when you come to Earth where it's a squad of people, a squad of souls who come to Earth who feel like it's their personal responsibility to help clean up what's going on here. Even though it's meant to be a realm of duality, it's really shifted. It's quite dark right now. And so they feel that they have this objective to balance the scales and make it more fair. And so what they do, this is their soul's purpose, is to incarnate on Earth and try to fix the issues. And so there's one group of them who incarnates into really closed-minded communities, and they help bring consciousness, bring awareness. There's one who brings art and beauty. They're the mad artists. They're the people who bring beauty and creativity to the planet to inspire other people to remember their creative potential. These people inspire people to awaken to the truth of what's really happening here. There's another group who's here to just I feel like they're constantly bringing technical wisdom. Like, what is the capacity of the human body? What is the capacity of our mind? So they're like the scientists who show us what the human potential is. And then there's this pocket of people over here. And every time I meet one of them, because I'll ask, is anyone on a project here? And if I ever meet these people, I tell them every time, you're so much braver than I, because I never would do what you're doing. But they deliberately take incarnations that are very dark, very difficult, very challenging. So where they'll experience victimization, abuse, neglect, objectification, all the most awful things. And one of the key features is it will be how humans do not treat the physical vessel very, very well. So it's physical victimization, abuse, violence, sexual. They get right into the trenches of the darkness on purpose. And their mission is they're going to go through it, they're going to heal it, and they're going to become someone who tells their story. And their actual purpose, their literal number one intention for coming to Earth at all, is to be the beacon for other people still overcoming the issue. And whenever I meet these people, it's awful. Lots of people have lots of childhood abuse, sexual, physical. Lots of times they have violent partners, or they go through lots of devastating loss, like lots of death or miscarriages, like these types of things. I don't even think anyone could sign up for that journey. It is a special type of strong person that even would get permitted to do that objective. Do you see how empowering that is? I'm not saying everybody who's experienced something challenging is that person, because I think they're actually moderately rare, but you should never feel disempowered entirely based on your circumstances or your lived experiences. Because I hate to say it, but we all have medicine. We all have magic. And to get stuck in the places that hurt you the most, it's just stunting you at a certain level on the polarity spectrum, right? So, tips for discerning what is real and not real, light versus dark, empowerment versus victimization, individuated empowerment, based on the little spark of divinity that's yours and only yours. You will not be compared to your peers. You will not be compared to the people in your socioeconomic class, your orientation, or your race. You will be seen as a fabric, a thread of the universe that is beautiful and infinite. The people in the light are not going to label you based on some external conglomerate style things. They're not even going to see you as a man or a woman or a rich or a poor person. These definitions don't exist in the spiritual realm. It's just an experience you elected to have for whatever reason that is only yours to truly know. That it should make you feel uplifted and give you compassion towards yourself and make you feel infinite without brushing over the fact that we all have work to do. We all have stories. We all have, karma. We all have things that effects we've set into motion that have not created ideal results for us. The dark agenda is going to make you feel like nothing is your fault. You have no power in your story, which means you have no power to fix it, that you're a victim in all of your stories, that you should feel shame, or you should feel you've done something wrong, or that you're somehow flawed. Your code is flawed because of some type of external experience. They'll make you compare yourself to other people. They will highlight your personality in this one lifetime and tell you that it's all that you are and it's all that you'll ever be. The dark agenda will organize people into external, identifiable categories and pit you against all other categories, fighting over who is to blame, whose responsibility it is to fix, and ultimately create division between your fellow brothers and sisters in spirit. Divide and conquer is a method for control as old as time. If you're like, wow, that's a lot, remembering your body is going to react and your emotions are going to react first about if it's light or if it's maybe not so light. And the point of even knowing what the spectrum is knowing, oh, and then the darkness is really fear, shame, guilt inducing. And the point of knowing the difference is so that you live in less fear, because when something comes into your world to bring shame or guilt or fear upon you and show you where your limits are and cap you off at your potential, that you can say, wow, immediately, that's not true. Again, the person saying it might have really good intentions. It doesn't necessarily make it any more light or dark, right? But then you can start to filter your world so that you do feel empowered. You don't feel limited. You don't feel like your story defines you in a way that's limiting. It's like, wow, okay, I really went through some hard things. Well, that means I have a greater light to shine, right? I have more medicine. My wounds become my wisdom, which means I have so much wisdom. My pain becomes my power, which means I have this magnetic light that I radiate to the rest of the world, and it's going to shine down bright and I'm going to impact many people. So, anyways, it's to help us not get stuck in the trap of fear and anxiety. And honestly, it's an energy drain. It's where people or corporations or politicians or institutions funnel our prana. And a lot of the people in this institution might not actually have bad intentions. I bet you their intentions are pretty damn pure. But the people running the top of it have bad intentions. And we need to be able to see these things so that we keep our energy to ourselves and we stay on our path to our infinite and beautiful potential that exists in all of us. So, anyways, I digress. Thank you for coming, and I'm wishing you all the greatest discernment out there.